So, I've had plenty of requests to talk about this one huge subject. A subject with a lot of nuance and history and scholarship surrounding it. And one that I don't feel entirely qualified to talk about. And since this is the last Shakespeare video I'm doing this year, and yeah, I'm keeping it short this year, and since it is Pride Month, I'm happy to say that
I'm Rantasmo, and the complete works of William Shakespeare needs more gay.
Whoa, hold up.
Yes, Kyle? Crossover? So, Shakespeare.
Yeah, I'm excited.
I'm a little overwhelmed, to be honest. Shakespeare is such a dense subject.
Oh yes, there is literally centuries worth of scholarship to wade through, and I barely know where to start. I mean, certainly not with the topic as broad as Shakespeare and queer theory.
Well, most of what I could find on the subject was about the possibility of William Shakespeare being either gay or bi, or at least not straight. He was married to a woman and fathered 3 children, but that doesn't necessarily mean much. It seems like when most people talk about the possibility of Shakespeare being queer, they point to his sonnets as evidence.
Right, especially the early cycle. Like Sonnet 18, the one that everybody knows.
Yeah, shall I compare thee to a summer's day?
It was addressed to a young man, the famous fair youth. Among Shakespeare scholars, his identity has long been a source of speculation, and part of that speculation involves the precise nature of their relationship, whether Shakespeare admired the youth platonically, or if it was sexual in nature. Sure, Sonnet 18 is fairly chaste, but Sonnet 20? It's worth reading the whole thing. A woman's face with nature's own hand painted hast thou, the master mistress of my passion. A woman's gentle heart, but not acquainted with shifting change, as is false women's fashion. An eye more bright than theirs, less false and rolling, gilding the object whereupon it gazeth. A man in hue, all hues in his controlling, which steals men's eyes and women's souls amazeth. And for a woman wert thou first created, till nature, as she wrought thee, fell a doting, and by addition me of thee defeated, by adding one thing, to my purpose, nothing. But since she pricked thee out for women's pleasure, mine be thy love, and thy love's use their treasure.
Translation?
You're hot. Shame about the penis.
Wow, there's a lot to unpack. There's some pretty casual sexism in that whole shifting change is as false women's fashion, as if he's setting up feminine aspects as being inferior to masculine ones. Plus the line, master mistress of my passion, definitely seems to be, at the very least, blurring the boundary of gender.
It's worth mentioning that early editors of Shakespeare would scrub hints of queerness from the record, replacing male pronouns with female ones, even suggesting that Shakespeare's passion towards this young man was purely platonic. And, for better or for worse, we're still doing this. Scholar Eve Sedgwick's landmark examination of the sonnets argued that Shakespeare delineated a male heterosexuality that includes a strong sense of male homosociality, without stigmatizing love between men or denoting it as somehow lesser than love between man and woman. Sedgwick writes, "Within the world sketched in these sonnets, there is not an equal opposition or a choice posited between two such institutions as homosexuality, under whatever name, and heterosexuality."
So it's ambiguous enough to be interpreted either way?
Yes, but there's one way that's usually favored over the other.
Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate.
Shakespeare in Love suggests that the fair youth was, in reality, Gwyneth Paltrow. So Shakespeare still writes his sonnets to a young man, but in this version, it's a woman in a man's disguise. It's fanfic heteronormativity. So even if Shakespeare romances a young man, he stays straight because he kisses her bubbies.
He did. I saw him kissing her bubbies.
But this is all assuming that 1, his sonnets are autobiographical, and 2, the same standards of heteronormativity that apply today also applied 450 years ago. neither of which are certain.
Very true.
That's why I'm not all that interested in speculating about what Shakespeare's sexuality might have been. It's hard to prove his possible queerness, but it's not hard to show the possible queerness of his plays.
Yeah, but that's difficult too, because, as you know,
Homosexuality and heterosexuality are modern inventions. So, just to clarify here, the behavior that we associate with being gay or straight has existed for always. But the way that behavior has been perceived and the labels and identities that we ascribe to that behavior have evolved greatly over time. So what's queer for us may not have been queer in another era.
In her introduction to Shakespeare, excellent compilation by the way, Montavi Menon describes this very problem. The problem of getting a good working definition of queer theory that's applicable to all cultures at all times in all places. Menon writes, "If queerness can be defined, then it is no longer queer."
Exactly, so a practice like queer coding would be highly culturally specific. I'm not sure how Shakespeare's audience would register a character as queer.
Yeah, about that. Menon argues that there may have been queer coding within the verse itself. While most of Shakespeare's characters speak in iambs, a few speak in trochees, like Macbeth's witches, described as female but bearded, or the fairies of A Midsummer Night's Dream.
Huh. When did fairy start getting used as a term for homosexual?
Late 1800s, I want to say?
Interesting.
Fairies away, swift as a shadow, up and down and up and down. I will lead them up and down.
So following this thought, there's a convincing argument to be made that through this coded poetic queerness, Shakespeare's plays may have delineated modern notions of heterosexual and homosexual. So Harold Bloom may have been onto something when he said Shakespeare invented the human.
I can see it. The fairies in A Midsummer Night's Dream are often played as camp gay. And to me, they've always seemed very coded. They almost act like they're above sexuality, with Puck as the sassy gay friend who delights in the foibles of the straight drama around him. Come to think of it, aren't the magical characters often gender-bent in modern productions? I'm thinking of Prospera, played by Helen Mirren.
Well, to some degree. Actually, now might be a good time to talk about how Shakespeare wrote gender fluidity into the plays themselves.
Should we have started with that point?
Too late now. Let's look at a play like Twelfth Night, a play all about the fluidity of gender. The central romance goes as follows. Orsino, a duke, is sad because he loves Olivia, who does not love him back. Viola, a woman, disguises herself as a man, Cesario, not just to protect her identity, but also to revive the memory of her dead twin brother. Cesario is essentially a trans man. Cesario serves as the messenger for Orsino, delivering messages to Olivia. Complicating things, Olivia falls for Cesario, and Cesario falls for Orsino. A woman presenting as male, another woman lusting for them as they lust after a man. A queer love triangle. That's resolved in the straightest way possible, by reviving the male twin. Any fluidity within Viola Cesario's sex and gender is straightened out by having Viola present as female and giving Olivia a cis male twin to love. What could have been a genderqueer poly relationship becomes two straight couples.
Yeah, queerness is an obstacle and happily ever after is always cis-hetero.
Shakespeare's done this in other plays too. As You Like It ditches Rosalind's identity of Ganymede for her romance with Orlando, despite the obvious affection Celia has for her. I mean, the play outright says that they shared a bed.
There's also been a lot speculated about hidden desires suppressed in Shakespeare's villains. Iago jealous of Othello's affection for Desdemona.
Not to mention the amazingly erotic pairing of Coriolanus and Aufidius.
But it's not only villains who've been reinterpreted as gay. No less a Shakespearean than Ian McKellen once floated the idea that Antonio from The Merchant of Venice is closeted. His first line is, "In sooth, I know not why I am so sad." A plausible theory, Bassanio, his best friend, is getting married, and not to him.
But there's one thing that we haven't mentioned. And it's a big thing. And it applies to every play that Shakespeare ever wrote. Every last role, even the most passionate lines between the straightest characters, were written to be performed by men to men. So, Antony and Cleopatra, two male actors. Beatrice and Benedict, 2 male actors.
Saints do not move. They'll grant for prayer's sake.
And yes, Romeo and Juliet,
Then move not while my prayers effect I take.
originally played by male actors.
So even in original performances, the heteronormative endings were almost always subverted by non-heteronormative performance practices.
Exactly. It's not just the magical characters or the queer-coded characters. Every single character Shakespeare ever wrote can be, and has been, uncoupled from normative notions of sex and gender. A female Hamlet dates back to the 1700s. Hell, the first performance of Hamlet to be filmed starred Sarah Bernhardt as Hamlet. And it continues to this day. In modern performance, whether or not the characters are cis-hetero, every performance of the works of William Shakespeare holds a queer potential.
And that's great. To see Shakespeare through a queer lens makes sense. If we're going to continue this narrative that Shakespeare is the greatest writer in the English language, that all forms of humanity can be found in his works.
That he invented the human?
Right. Wouldn't that mean all forms of humanity?
All genders?
All sexes?
All identities?
All forms of love?
Happy Pride Month.
My ear should catch your voice. My eye should catch your eye. My tongue your tongue.